Hello and thanks for joining us for today's video. Just before we start, we want to tell you that we'll be releasing short videos daily. You can watch them here on YouTube, but we'll also be posting them on TikTok and Instagram. Links to both our Instagram account and TikTok account are in the description box. Thank you so much for your time. Without any further delay, here's this week's video. Number 3. S. Junior Faili. In April 2002, 23-year-old Marcus Doig lived in Auckland, New Zealand. He had a full-time job at a bank, and he worked part-time at a pizza parlor. He had worked at the pizza shop during his university years, and he continued to work there after getting the bank job, as he planned to do some overseas traveling. On May 8, 2002, Doig was working at the pizza parlor with the owner, John Bell. Suddenly, a young man in a disguise came in with a sawed-off rifle. He ordered Bell to empty the till, and he complied. Doig was working in the back. The robber ordered him to come out to the front area of the parlor and get on the floor. The robber put the money in his bag. Doig was complying with all the orders. But as he was getting to the floor, the robber shot him point blank in the back of the head. Bell ran, and the robber fired 2 shots at him, but missed both times. The thief ran out the door with about $400. This was not the man's first robbery. He had been on a robbery spree for several weeks. However, this was the first time he murdered someone, but it wouldn't be the last. A week later, on May 15, 2002, the same young man went into a bank with a gun. The manager of the bank was 43-year-old John Vaughn. Vaughn followed all the robber's directions, and he did not resist. After getting the money, the robber shot him in the head and then ran out of the bank. Vaughn died hours later. The police released still images of surveillance footage of the killer. The parents of 18-year-old S. Junior Faili realized it was him. Faili had behavioral problems since the age of 3. His parents took him to see a Catholic priest because they thought he was possessed by a demon. He was constantly in trouble at school for fighting and stealing. He was expelled from school at age 15. He started smoking marijuana when he was 11, and by the time he was 18, he was using methamphetamine. His parents were told to get him psychiatric help, but they never did. Faili's parents contacted the police, and he was arrested. In July 2002, S. Junior Faili pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life without the chance of parole for 17 years and 9 months. It is the 3rd longest non-parole term in the history of the New Zealand judicial system. When talking to a psychiatrist, Faili revealed that the ghosts of Marcus Doig and John Vaughn haunted him. He said that the ghosts initially came to him in his dreams. It started with just their voices. He said that one night he woke up in his remand cell and he saw the ghosts of the men. He said they abused him, but it was never made public how the ghost abused him. What is known is that the ghost told him he was going to hell. After the ghostly encounter, Faili said he had been struggling to sleep. Many people thought it was poetic justice. S. Junior Faili was eligible for parole in 2020, but it's unknown if he received parole. His current whereabouts are unknown. Number 2. Martin Sullivan. In December 1936, Martin Sullivan was a patrolman in Duquesne, a city in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania metro area. Sullivan had been a police officer for 30 years. He lied about his age, claiming he was 65, but he was actually 72 years old. On December 18, 1936, a fellow officer, Thomas Gallagher, who had known Sullivan since he was a child, was ordered to arrest Sullivan and bring him to jail. Sullivan had been accused of repeatedly raping a 12-year-old neighborhood girl, Antoinette Vukala. Antoinette had been friends with Sullivan's 13-year-old former live-in housekeeper, Helen Benda. Sullivan had also been sexually abusing Helen. Social worker Laura Bacon reviewed the accusation and found that it had merit. There had been a hearing where Antoinette's mother, Mary, and the social worker, Laura Bacon, testified. The presiding judge ordered Sullivan to be arrested and held in jail. Officer Thomas Gallagher went to Sullivan's home and made him leave his service weapon at home. As Gallagher and Sullivan walked to the jail, Sullivan asked if they could stop by his son's home so he could explain the situation to him. Gallagher agreed and watched Sullivan enter his son's home. About 30 to 40 minutes later, he emerged from the front door. Sullivan then convinced Gallagher to let him talk to the social worker, Laura Bacon. Gallagher once again agreed, and they went to Bacon's home. Then, in front of his fellow police officer, Sullivan pulled out his service revolver and fatally shot 58-year-old Laura Bacon. Gallagher grabbed him by the wrist and shouted, quote, "My God, Sullivan, are you crazy?" unquote. Sullivan replied, quote, "I'm not crazy. I'm glad I did it. I'm satisfied now. Let's go," unquote. Gallagher took Sullivan to the police station. At the police station, the police learned that Bacon wasn't the only person that Sullivan killed that night. After Sullivan entered his son's home, he exited out the back door. He went to his home and retrieved his gun. He then went to the home of his former live-in housekeeper, 13-year-old Helen Benda. Helen wasn't home at the time, but Sullivan shot her parents, 53-year-old Joseph and 45-year-old Helen Benda. Helen and her mother shared the same name. Sullivan then went to Antoinette's home. He shot her 50-year-old father, Joseph, and her 23-year-old brother, Milan. Her mother, Mary, ran upstairs and Sullivan followed her. Mary jumped from a window and was injured when she landed. Sullivan ran downstairs and found her on the street, screaming for a police officer. Sullivan said, quote, "Here's a policeman, I'll help you," unquote. He then shot her in the head and the stomach. Antoinette and her other brother managed to escape without injury. Sullivan then went back to his son's home and met Gallagher out front. Of the 6 people Sullivan shot, only Antoinette's father survived his wounds. Sullivan made a full confession. He believed he was being framed, so he went on a killing spree. Sullivan said he felt no remorse for anything he did. After Sullivan was arrested, many children came forward and said he had sexually abused them. They felt powerless to do anything because he was a police officer. Martin, the door-to-door killer Sullivan, was only tried for one of the 5 murders he committed, the murder of Laura Bacon. He had shot Bacon in front of Gallagher and confessed, so it was an easy conviction. Sullivan was sentenced to death. While on death row, Sullivan was haunted by several ghosts. The ghosts came for him at night in his cell, and he would scream throughout the twilight. Things got to be so bad that he was given a 3-week stay of execution, and he was transferred to a mental health unit at a different prison where he was given a sanity test. Besides the ghosts of his victims, he was also haunted by the ghost of 2 men. He said, quote, "I get a fear which comes over me. Something grabs at my stomach. I don't know what I'm doing. I seem to see somebody standing at my side or in back of me. 2 men are after me who want to gouge my eyes out. They keep saying to me, 'Come out of there.' When I turn around, they're gone," unquote. Although the ghosts of his victims haunted him, he did not have any remorse for his actions. Martin Sullivan was executed in the electric chair shortly after midnight on March 21, 1938. He was 74 years old. Martin Sullivan is the oldest person to be executed in Pennsylvania. Number 1. The Pet Cemetery Murder. In 1985, 61-year-old Dorothy Thompson owned the Azalea Original Pet Cemetery in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana. She lived in an Edwardian mansion on the grounds. The cemetery was started 35 years earlier by her mother, Grace Wynn. Grace had a colorful past. In 1934, Grace was having an affair with her first husband, Jack Thompson. They had divorced several years earlier and both had remarried. Dorothy's father was supposedly Grace's second husband, Arthur Wynn, but in adulthood, she used the last name Thompson. When Grace and Jack split up, Jack was a deputy in the circuit clerk's office. But in the years since their divorce, he had become a powerful politician in Kansas City, Missouri. On September 30th, 1934, Grace waited outside the home of Jack and his wife, Mary Thompson. When they arrived home, Grace shot Mary 5 times with a .25 caliber handgun. She was arrested on the spot. She was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years of prison. However, before she went to prison, her verdict was overthrown on a technicality. She then fled to Louisiana. The police arrested her and an extradition hearing was held. Grace's lawyer argued that she was being persecuted because people were trying to extort her former husband. The Louisiana governor believed her claims and denied the extradition. Grace was never retried for Mary Thompson's murder. In 1946, Grace and 21-year-old Dorothy moved onto the former Toka plantation and started the pet cemetery shortly afterward. On November 26, 1970, the police were called to the pet cemetery. Dorothy had fatally shot her husband, 41-year-old Logan Banks. Dorothy and her mother, Grace, claimed that Banks was drunk and came at them with a knife. The shooting was deemed to be self-defense and no charges were laid. 6 years later, another one of Dorothy's husbands was shot to death in the cemetery. Dorothy claimed she found him dead and didn't know who shot him. No one was ever arrested in the case. In 1977, Grace Wynn died at age 88 of natural causes. After her mother's death, Dorothy continued to run the pet cemetery. The remains of over 5,000 animals were buried in the cemetery. Many were birds, cats, and dogs, but there were also monkeys and a cheetah. One of the most famous animals buried there was a boa constrictor that appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. On May 22, 1985, the dead body of Dorothy Thompson was found by fishermen in the Mississippi River. She had been hogtied with heavy chains. Also, there was a plastic bag over her head that had been sealed with wire. The cause of death was suffocation. Dorothy was last seen alive about 3 weeks earlier, on April 13, 1985. The police immediately had a suspect, 31-year-old pet cemetery groundskeeper Randy Nodier. Dorothy was killed about 2 weeks before there was a hearing regarding a lawsuit she had filed against Nodier. Dorothy claimed he had tricked her into signing over ownership of the pet cemetery to him. Dorothy had developed substance abuse problems after her mother's death. She said that Nodier had manipulated her into selling the pet cemetery to him for $20,000. But there's no evidence that Dorothy received the funds, so she was trying to get the sale voided. The police never found any evidence that connected Brandon Nodier to the murder, so he wasn't arrested. The case quickly went cold. After Dorothy Thompson's murder, ownership of the cemetery went back to her estate. It was ultimately abandoned and fell into disrepair. Landscapers refused to work on the property because of how dangerous it's become, especially after Hurricane Katrina in August 2005. There are also rumors that Dorothy's mother, Grace, had buried hundreds of thousands of dollars on the property. so people trespass on the property searching for the treasure. Others have visited it because it's creepy. Some people believe that it is haunted. Several people have seen Dorothy Thompson's ghost in the abandoned pet cemetery. In 2009, 24 years after the murder, the police reopened the investigation because a person who knew Brandon Nodier contacted them. They said Nodier had confessed to killing Dorothy. They also said that Nodier told them that Dorothy's ghost came to him in a dream and haunted him. The police talked to other people who knew Nodier. At least 2 people said that Dorothy's ghost had haunted them and they had terrible nightmares. The police talked to a man who was Nodier's assistant at the time of the murder. When they interviewed him, he was in prison. He confessed that he had witnessed the murder. The Nodier intimidated him into not saying anything. After the police talked to the former assistant, Nodier visited him in prison and threatened his wife. In April 2012, 27 years after the murder, the police arrested Brandon Nodier. In July 2014, he agreed to a plea deal and pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 10 years of prison. If he served his entire sentence, he would have been released in 2022. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Also, don't forget to watch our shorts on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Once again, thank you for watching.